This is Democracy Watch. So, Marc, Trump's attorneys have now been booked in Fulton County, Georgia. First off, can you continue to practice law as a criminal defendant?
It's like amazing. The lawyers need lawyers. It's like a nesting doll. The
Right.
lawyer, the guys do the things, and then the lawyers do things, and the lawyers need
At
lawyers.
least some people in Trump's orbit are finally getting jobs after his pretty dismal job.
That's exactly right. Look, normally when a lawyer is indicted, the last thing on their mind is practicing law. They kind of have bigger problems. But some of the lawyers involved have been disbarred places. Rudy Giuliani said his license suspended. Others are in the middle of that process. John Eastman, there's now like a disclaimer on the California bar website that basically is like, hey, consumer alert. If you want to hire this guy, you may want to know he's currently under indictment in Georgia. So it's not like an automatic disbarment by being indicted, because an indictment's just charges. It's not a finding of guilt. But usually it is not a good sign for your future as a lawyer.
Well, just in general, do Trump's lawyers' ability to practice law as far as the bar is concerned rely on whether they're convicted at trial, or do these determinations happen completely independent of each other? So basically, if they're going to be disbarred, does that rely solely on whether they're convicted, or is this investigation going to happen independently, and they may escape conviction, but they could still be disbarred?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So the threshold for being disbarred is whether or not you violate the rules of responsibility, whether you basically violate the bar ethics rules, and whether that is a serious enough violation. So you can be found to have violated those rules and not committed any crime. Lawyers get disbarred for things that are not criminal at all, and certainly they can be disbarred for conduct that is criminal, even when there are no criminal charges filed, or where there are criminal charges filed and there's an acquittal, but the bar standard is essentially lower. In other words, I keep cautioning people to not conflate the criminal standard, which is presumption of innocence beyond a reasonable doubt, with other standards, which are lower, because you're not depriving someone of a liberty interest, right? Practicing law is a privilege. It's not a right, whereas going to prison is obviously taking away your rights. So that's why we saw a number of these lawyers, Jenna Ellis, Rudy Giuliani, and John Eastman, in the middle of proceedings, already being subject to bar proceedings even before they were charged.
Yeah, and that's perfectly put. By the way, I would recommend for anybody that wants to read more about this to check out Marc's most recent article in Democracy Docket. I'll put the link right here on the screen. So definitely click that link and make sure to hold it until after this episode so you can read more about this. Marc, the Trump ally talking point here is that attorneys all have the right to aggressively defend their clients, and that's what these people have done, and that now they're just getting locked up for it. Can you speak to that claim?
Look, I'm a pretty aggressive lawyer. Most people would say, who like me and don't like me, that I'm a pretty aggressive lawyer. And there's nothing wrong with being an aggressive lawyer. What you're not allowed to do is to conspire to deny people the right to vote. You're not allowed to commit mail fraud or wire fraud. You're not allowed to make false statements to the government. You're not allowed to engage in a racketeering enterprise. And the fact that you have a law degree doesn't immunize you in some ways from those things. So like, one of the things I keep hearing is the lawyers are like, but I was being a lawyer. But like, yeah, but that's like being like, I went with the guy robbing the bank, but I was his lawyer.
Right.
You can't rob a bank. Like, the fact that they're a lawyer doesn't give them license to violate the criminal laws. So there is nothing that none of these lawyers are being charged with being aggressive lawyers. They are being charged with violating state and federal crimes.
Okay. I know it's kind of unfair to ask you to get into these Trump attorneys' heads, but
Oh
what is
no. Oh no. Oh no.
what is the upside to defending a notorious con man like Donald Trump, who has a proclivity for destroying the careers of his previous lawyers? Like, what do these people see as their benefit here?
Okay, first of all, I feel for a moment here, I'm like, in their head, it's dark, it's dank, and it's very empty. It's like
Yeah.
echoing. There's not a lot
Yeah.
going on here. But what's the benefit? There is no benefit, right? Like one of the things as a lawyer is you have the opportunity to choose your clients. Now, there are some lawyers who don't, right? The folks who represent indigent defendants, people are like, everyone has a right to a lawyer. That involves a very specific kind of law and it's very specific lawyers. But Donald Trump is hiring lawyers who are undertaking this voluntarily. And one of the first things they teach you about being a lawyer is like, choose your clients on whether they're good clients. A good client is someone who tells you the truth. A good client is someone who doesn't try to co-opt you into a criminal conspiracy. A good client does not say, I need my Roy Cohen and I want you to be my Roy Cohen. Roy Cohen was a criminal. So like, what kind of, he was unethical. What kind of theory is that you were doing that? I don't know why they're doing it other than the notoriety, maybe the speaking fees at the next MAGA convention. I don't know.
Well, obviously, Trump has legal representation in these cases, even though the turnover is higher than I would imagine you'd see at like the local McDonald's. But like, are these attorneys still reputable? I'm curious about what kind of attorney you get when you have a reputation for getting your attorneys indicted.
Yeah. So look, I think you should distinguish between the various lawyers handling various cases. The first thing is, it is extraordinary, and we should take a step back for a moment and recognize that so few prominent lawyers want to represent Donald Trump, which is pretty extraordinary. I mean, representing the former president of the United States in normal times is like really prestigious.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that is something law firms would trip over themselves. One of the things we saw after 2020 was a lot of the big Republican law firms just flee Donald Trump. Right. So like, in some sense, he has wound up with a self-selecting group of lawyers because a lot of the normal prominent Republican law firms don't want anything to do with him. Now, that said, I think there is a range of lawyers who have associated themselves with Donald Trump. I think there are some honest to God criminal defense lawyers who are good, qualified lawyers who take this as a challenge. Their job is to defend criminal cases. They oftentimes are representing clients who are guilty. They are oftentimes representing their clients who are guilty, who have made bad life choices. And therefore, they're like, this is just like another client in that. Then there are other lawyers who I think are like moth to the flame. They want to be part of MAGA. And those are the ones who I think are finding themselves in more trouble.
Yeah. Are there any attorneys included in the Fulton County indictment, because that's where we're seeing a number of them now posing for mugshots, that do pose an especially egregious danger to the United States?
Yeah, I would name two. Not to like.
I feel like I know who they're going to be. Can I guess?
Sure.
Would it be John Eastman and Jeffrey Clark?
Absolutely. No, that's exactly right. And the reason is that in both instances, right? Like, Rudy Giuliani is like, I don't think a lot of people are going out and hiring Rudy Giuliani right now. Jenna Ellis, I think, is now like a podcaster, but John Eastman fancies himself as a constitutional scholar, and he just got hired by the Colorado Republican Party to actually do constitutional litigation. And so I think the veneer of him being a professor, of him being viewed as a constitutional lawyer, and the fact that he still is as actively soliciting clients, I think makes him especially dangerous. The other one who is probably top of my list is exactly as you say, is Clark. Why? Because he was a Department of Justice lawyer, right? He did what he did with the veneer of working for the top law enforcement agency of the United States. And I think that is a particularly pernicious fact that makes him especially dangerous. Plus, he seems to be on the right-wing speaking tour, according to the Washington Post. He is in demand in that world. And both of them are leaning in to their crimes, their alleged criminal activity, rather than repenting from it.
Right, and that doesn't exactly bode well for the future here. Marc, is there anything that these state...
No, and we may, by the way, if we get to a point of talking about sentencing, we should bookmark this conversation, because I think a judge will view their conduct through that prism as well.
Yeah. Is there anything that these state bars can do to hedge against this kind of abuse from its attorneys in the future? I mean, there are so many Trump-aligned lawyers here who have so blatantly and shamelessly and unapologetically broken the law, and clearly there's too much leeway. So is there anything that we can do to hedge against this?
Absolutely. Look, the bar needs to have a reckoning with itself. And it is, I think, if I have one major criticism right now of the legal profession, is that it is too easy for them to say, well, we're dealing with John Eastman as John Eastman, we're dealing with Giuliani as Rudy Giuliani. There was obviously a systemic failure of the legal profession around this, because there are just lots of different lawyers from different states, different roles, and the bar needs to reform itself. There are a couple of things I'd offer up front. The first is, it takes way too long to disbar or to protect the public from unethical lawyers. I mean, look at the John Eastman proceeding that, has been going on now, and now it's kind of like on hiatus about whether it goes forward or doesn't go forward. In the meantime, he's practicing law. And so the bars need to be much more proactive and aggressive. But the second is the bars need to make clear, if it was not already, that undermining the right to vote, undermining free and fair elections, undermining democracy is in and of itself a violation of your obligation as a lawyer. I know it may not have been spelled out before. The bar obligations talk a lot about how they treat clients and making sure you treat clients fairly, how you treat courts, making sure you are candid with courts and treat courts fairly. I think it's about time that the bar adopts principles about how you treat our country, how you treat the legal profession, how you treat democracy. And until the bar, we see those kinds of reforms, I worry that we will see repeats.
Well, that was perfectly put. So with that said, we'll leave it there. Thank you to you and your team for the work you do to protect voting rights and elections across the country. For anybody watching, a small favor. If you want to help Marc, then please sign up for Democracy Docket. That is the best way to support what he does. It's a free news outlet focused on everything voting and elections. I'll put the link right here on the screen. It's also in the post description of this video. Again, the best way to support him and help what he does. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Marc Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.